All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Um, I'm going to start off with just saying that the last few months I've been in this I would call it old school pattern, right? So for my worship in the morning times, I usually spend like some devotion time, and I've been pulling out the classics, right? And so I can see that there's like a spirit on that because I got in the car with my wife today. We haven't really talked about it, and she's like, she has Michael W. Smith playing, and I'm like, For Him and all these bands, and I'm like, are we all in this old school, area where we're pulling up a lot of the songs that just really where the Lord just has moved powerfully through music over the course of the years. And for me in this season, I've just been really digging from those wells that really where I was raised up in the church. And so, real quick, I just want to let you guys know that many in this room I've known my entire Christian life, and or shortly thereafter when I was just an infant, little baby. Don Calkins and Joy. In the early days of ministry, Don was on my board and helped me really learn how to develop a not-for-profit and how to get involved in ministry when I wasn't called to be like your typical pastor. And if you ever heard me lead worship, I led worship once with Don, and he had to bail me out like the whole entire time. And so wasn't my gifting, right? And so in the early days of my Christian life, I thought you only had a couple of choices. You either became a pastor or you were on the worship team, and that was pretty much it. But God's call in my life really sent me to troubled kids, and that's where I've spent my entire life. So working with troubled teens since the time I was 22 years old. And you ever run into people and they're like, we haven't seen them for a while, and they're like, man, you look good. The years have been kind. I don't hear that. So I hear, you look way older than me now. I mean, maybe it's my big gray beard, I'm only 25. So it's like, I don't know what happened over the course of time, but I look like an old man. So, all right. So this morning, what I'm going to share with you guys today is really, I'm not going to be teaching. I'm going to be sharing. So there's a little bit of a difference between that. But one of the things I want to start off by saying is when God was, making people in heaven, he's ordaining people, calling them to a purpose and basically saying, hey, this is the call that I have upon you. The cloth that he was cutting from, when he was cutting you guys out, he was cutting me out of that same piece of cloth, right? So when we walk in here, my wife and I are in here, we see where Liberty Remnant Church is at. I mean, even in the name, the Remnant, that name is so powerful because we can see, if you watch the news or just see the challenges that we're having in America, the Lord is really, I just see him, fanning over the land, and he is bringing this core remnant that is going to be able to make a powerful impact, both for God's kingdom and for our nation. And I just, so when I'm here, I just feel like I can just feel that I'm like, man, we're cut from the same cloth. So, so as I'm sharing with you guys today, my goal is to share about the work that Zara and I and our team, the work that we do, but also to encourage you in your own life about what God's calling you to do. I don't really feel like I don't like talking and just like, hey, check us out, because really my desire is to motivate people to fulfill what God has called them to do as well. So, okay. So anyways, the ministry that I oversee currently is called The Source. It started back in 2000 when I had a call of God in my life, like I was saying, to be in ministry, but I didn't fit the typical mold of the pastor, worship leader. If I was leading worship, you guys would be like, man, this is so off key. I would fit into some countries, probably like India. I'd probably be awesome in India because, if you ever heard some, for them, it's a little different, but for us, we go there, it's like, this seems really offbeat. And so, but I'd fit in great there. So, but as we were working, I met this man, and he worked with juvenile offenders. And believe it or not, when I was a teenager, I was pretty rough around the edges. And so I graduated the bottom of my class in high school with 21 credits. I had a 1.8 GPA. Killed it, man. Killed it, okay? So, but then the Lord redeemed me in my early 20s, and then that's when I realized that all the stuff that were meant to destroy me, my criminal lifestyle, my drug addiction, all that stuff, God could use for good, and that's what he's done throughout my life. So currently, we're running a ministry called The Source, and The Source started in 2011. And my wife and I was always complaining about my current job, that I wasn't able to do the ministry that I wanted to do. I was in ministry, but I wasn't able. I worked for the YMCA, and it was just going a different direction than where I felt the Lord was taking us. So my beautiful bride always told me, she just kept on saying, like, you need to stop complaining and go start your own. And I'm like, okay, and so that's what I ended up doing. And I got started The Source in 2011. And what we do currently in 2015, so the first 4 years were like when you ever start a small business and your product market, is how you make your money. Well, my product market was punk teenagers. How much money do you think is in punk teenagers, right? It's like, so what are you selling? Well, I got this kid here. He stole 4 cars last week, beat up this homeless guy, and I'd like for you to pay for me to help him. So that was my sales pitch, right? So, but over the course of time, we've been able to grow this ministry, and an area that Zara and I have really been passionate about from the beginning is there is an overlap. So when you're going into a juvenile detention facility and I'm teaching classes to kids and I start talking to them about their life, their family structure, and they're saying, I have one parent at home, very common, one parent at home. Or many of the kids are like, I'm in foster care. I bounce from home to home to home. And so my wife and I got into foster care a long time ago. I think it was like 2000, I don't know, 2009, I think it was. And we've adopted 3 children out of foster care. And my youngest son, who he's in the children's church right now, his biological mother is a girl that I met at juvenile detention. And so I met her when she was 14. She just had a really, really rough life. She got pregnant at 18, and her mom called me basically and got a hold of me and said, hey, you know my daughter, she just had a baby. So the original plan was for her to go get clean and get him back. He's 8, and he's mine. And he's part of our family. Wonderful little boy, Javi, he's awesome. So our family has really, for us, we have been in the social welfare / human world, right? So basically our product is people. That's what our business is. And we're trying to help people who, if you are a good church kid, I probably won't work with you very long. But the only way I'll work with you, good church kids, is usually to inspire them to go help other people that really need our help. So anyway, I've just seen God's goodness over the course of my life. And it boils down to one simple thing for my wife and I, is we just chose to say yes to what God was calling us to do. Despite our weaknesses, despite our insecurities. Have you ever been asked by the Lord to do something, but your answer is typically, well, but God, I don't talk in front of people good. Well, but God, I'm not an evangelist. But God, I can't dance, I've been on the dance team, okay? Like I said, I've been on the worship team, and I can't do either of those good. But I just threw out that but. I'm like, but God, I can't dance. And then Don's like, yeah, you can, or they give you the flags. Back in the early days of Zion, they give you the flags, and you're like, it was horrible for me. So... but they would always be super gracious. And what it did for me is when you have that desire, despite recognizing your inadequacies, your failures, if you're willing to just throw aside that but God and do what he's calling you to do, it's really awesome because he gets the glory, because you're like, I don't know how I pulled that off because I didn't have nothing to do with it. All you were was obedient. And that's what God is looking for from his people, is just a heart that says, yes, Lord, we'll do whatever you're calling us to do, regardless of how difficult it looks or how challenging it looks. We're just going to do what he's calling us to do. And so that's why I find myself in the position I'm in now. So it's kind of crazy. I started off by saying I had a 1.8 GPA. Like, why is that loser up there talking? It shocks people in the room. In a lot of places that I speak, I'm only like one step removed from the governor, right? So I talk to people that are directly connected to the governor of Washington State. We all love him. He's the best governor we've ever had. So I have this platform to be able to bring kingdom principles to people that go and share with him, right? And I am the most uneducated person in the room. Almost every single time that I have a 2-year degree, an applied science degree in automotive technology, okay? So I can I used to be able to fix cars. That's a long time ago now. But so basically my degree is in automotive technology. However, I have the opportunity to speak on behalf of children in foster care to people that are one step removed from the governor. I talk to legislators often in Washington State, and the Lord has just really opened up these doors. And I want to just read something out of 2 Corinthians chapter 12. The Apostle Paul is writing about his own personal weakness, right? The Lord is calling him, and he has these limitations that are on his life. He described it as like a thorn in the flesh. And what the Lord says to him in verse 9, he says, my grace is sufficient for you. For his strength, my strength, the Lord would say, is made perfect in your weakness. That really takes out all of our excuses, doesn't it? You're like, yeah, I'm super weak, Lord, I can't do it. He's like, well, that's the whole point. You are a weakling, let me make you strong. And so it's really awesome, actually. So I'm going to try to plow through a few things really quick, because the part that I really, just to give you guys a little bit of background and history. So many people in this room, you guys have all had a direct impact on me. Many of you guys, if you know me, the Calkins, Chris right here, the Brinsons, Shale and Heidi. I've known these people, Scott and Sarah, my old OGs. I lived with Scott for like 2 years. We were roommates. Okay. So back in our younger days. So we have this history and really have been living life together. And even Mike and Jackie back there. Hi guys. So anyways, but I've seen the Lord just, he what he does is he builds families, and through the families he impacts people. And so that's back to that piece when I was talking about being cut out of the same cloth, right? We're fashioned for a purpose. And so, let me skip down a little bit. So currently the source, when I first started, I quit my job and they said, hey, what's your product market? I'm like, punk teenagers. You're going to be broke. And I was. So in the very beginning, 2011, I got one paycheck. I love sharing this story because it was like this was the moment where I was about to give it all up. I got my paycheck and I'm like, okay, come on. It's like playing Yahtzee, right? You're rolling for something. I didn't know what my paycheck was going to be that for that 2-week quarter. And I got it and I'm looking at it, I'm like, $145, 2 weeks work, 80 hours a week. I made $145. So I get in my car and I'm driving home and I've really reached the end of my rope. And my pastor at the time, John Solon, was always talking my wife and I up. He was saying, check out Chris and Sarah. They're going for it, serving the Lord. They're seeking him. They're doing everything they can. And so I have this mockery moment. I'm driving home. Check out Chris and Sarah. Watch Chris fall flat on his face, as I'm driving home with my $145 paycheck, right? Like super excited. So I called my wonderful wife and at the same time, I'm getting a job offer for like a really steady job, good pay. I'm going to be in charge, is going back to the YMCA, basically working as a facilities director. So I'd be running multiple buildings, decent job. I'd be making good money. And I called my wife and I said, hey, I got our paycheck, $145. I broke it down. That's like $1.80 an hour. I was super happy about it. And she she's a pretty courageous woman, very brave, and I wouldn't want anybody different. She basically says to me as I'm having my pity party, she says, did God call you to fail? And I'm just like stuck in my tracks. I'm like, what do you say? Yes, he did. You can't really, failure. If the Lord's calling you and you're obedient, whatever happens, if you're obedient, there is no failure, right? Because you're doing what he's called you to do. And so, so I just ate humble pie. I'm like, okay, I get it. And I called my friend up who was offering me the job. I said, hey, I'm not going to take the job. I'm either going to be successful or I'm going to crash and burn. And that was the words that I told him. And shortly after that, the Lord opened up some areas of finance. I had just some really cool provision happened. And then I got into writing policy. And I wrote policy and got a contract with the state of Washington. So to take care of high needs foster care kids, which I have a good overlap between kids that are in jail, kids that are in foster care. And so we basically now we take the kids that nobody else wants. And since that era was 2013, I think is when I was really started working on my contract development with the state, how to write a bunch of policies. And through that process, in 2015, we opened up our first group home. And so currently we've grown a lot since there. So I went from being the only employee making $1.80 an hour or whatever it is, to now I have like 70 people working for me full time. It's pretty crazy, right? And so what we're doing is we're taking the state of Washington's money, okay? They give me lots of money. And I'm using that money to build God's kingdom. And so, we are in a position where we're taking kids that the state of Washington's in control of, and we're putting them in an environment that is an environment of Jesus, an environment of love. Now, there's tons of challenges that go with that, but we have a pretty good, solid team. And, getting from the place where I had my first house, and then we have 4, so there's 17 kids that we can take. And we take the ones that are like, they're crazy. You get them and they're like, I'll just put it this way. I've been working with juvenile offenders since I was 22 years old, and I never, ever got in a physical fight with a kid until I opened up a group home. And I've been in like 50, right, where they're like, I'm going to take your head off, because they all want a shot at the old man because I'm small. But I have this thing called old man strength, and it comes in super handy, okay? So So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 7 mountains of influence that I think it's Johnny Enlow that has been going around circulating in Christian communities. Well, our mountain of influence, I'll read them off to you real quick. There's the mountains are basically labeled as there's the mountain of religion, family, education, media, arts and entertainment, government, and business. And for the source in our time right now, the main areas of influence that we are currently targeting, and this is at like the legislative state level, not international or not national yet, as far as influence in the United States, but in Washington State, we're becoming, in the foster care world, we're becoming well known. It's actually really awesome. So our areas of influence currently are family, government, and business, and then bring in some religion, right? So those are kind of, but I think our cores are family and government right now is really where my wife and I feel God's call to be, and we're seeing opportunities open. Just our new sheriff, that I'm pretty sure that the guy that's going to be our new sheriff was at our house for like 3 hours just a little bit ago. Came out to do a little fundraising because my wife set some stuff up, and we're just involved. She's involved in the Conservative Ladies of Washington, and just really trying to make a political impact because we see where our country's been heading, and we want to be in a spot where the church has to be involved. I mean, honestly, we have to be involved. We should not have gave up a lot of our areas of influence that the church had in years past. So foster care statistics in Washington State, there's about 10,000 kids in foster care. That's 10,000 kids from dysfunctional homes that a dysfunctional state comes in to take care of these kids. Now, there are good families in the foster care system, but the system itself, there's a lot of holes and there's a lot of difficulty when it comes to some policies. And out of those kids, every year about 2,100 of those kids, about currently 2,100 of those kids are legally free waiting for a family to adopt them. Okay, but when you meet some of these kids, you'll say, they'll catch your house on fire, or you're going to be sleeping and you might wake up and they're sharpening a knife right above you or something like that, right? I'm not kidding. Okay, that kind of stuff these are the kids I take, right? So anyway, but really it can be quite challenging. And so one of the things that I've seen, and you guys have seen it too, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting in these chairs, is I firmly believe that the church fell asleep along the way. Like, we fell asleep. We got so focused on what God was going to do in us, and that we missed out what he wanted to do through us. He was like, we got so into I just didn't feel the Spirit move today. He didn't really touch my life. And we got so focused on that we just started keeping ourselves inside the four walls, right? And the world kept going without us. Right? It just kept moving, right? We've had some recent victories, which I'm so happy about. Our Supreme Court Justice, like Clarence Thomas, that dude's going to go down in history as just a massive world changer. I've just been so happy about some of the decisions that have been coming out of there, and part of it has to do with the churches. We have the whole woke culture. Well, that's not us, but we want to be awake, right? We want to be awake to what God's doing and what he desires to do through us. The church bought the lie that the separation of church and state was where we were supposed to be, and all we've seen is failure after failure, and then the state and the government try to come in and fix their own failures with more failure. They're really good at failing, right? And so I've seen it lots, and really what we're at right now is we have this group of kids in our homes here in Spokane, where we have 17 of them. 17 spots is how many we can have. And we have them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we have this opportunity to influence these kids that no one else cares about. Really, they're the throwaway child. They don't have parents. Nobody cares about them. And also, we have the opportunity to model to the state of what it looks like to raise kids in a healthy environment. One of the things, we took these little kids, or this one person a little bit ago, and we were in the meeting, and this young child has been everywhere. She's 15 years old, and they've been everywhere. They've been to every mental health hospital, every what they would call clip placement, multiple group homes throughout town, and everybody's like, we've tried everything with this girl. We don't know how you're going to reach her. What are you going to do? And I'm sitting in the meeting, and I am not a mental health clinician, so I said, have you tried love? I'm like, have you tried love? And they look at me like dumbfounded, like, what? I'm like, that's what I want to try. I just want to love on her. And we've had this person the longest out of any placement that she's been in the last, 4 years, 5 years? We're on like a year and a half. And so it's really, really cool. Now, it's not easy. The work is crazy hard, but love works. Love is awesome and love works. So an area that in our state right now, so like I was saying, that these kids, they don't have people that are looking out for them. They don't have parents that are really involved. Their parents are usually drugged out or abusive. So they're really out of the picture, and the parents are dealing usually with the law enforcement side of care because of some of the atrocities that they've committed on their kids. And so then these social workers come in, and they, in Washington State, we are pretty flippin' blue, are we not? It's pretty blue in this state. And we'll get these social workers that come in. They're super educated. They're super woke. And then they are in charge of kids. And so there's been this massive increase in gender confusion in foster care. Like, I don't know if you've seen any of the stats, but it is on typically the foster care kids, there's 30% of them that identify, so 3 out of 10 of the kids identify as LGBT, and then the 5% of those kids identify as transgender. And so we have kids coming down the pipe that I'll get a packet of information on a child, and they're like, he wants to be placed in your boys' home. Well, I start reading, he's not a boy, okay, he's a girl. But somewhere in the process, there's been a social worker that's telling this young child who's been through massive trauma that, maybe it's because you just really don't understand what gender you are. Maybe you should do some exploring in that. And we're confusing the snot out of our kids. They're getting so confused. And then we're just buying into it, where these young kids are receiving stuff like hormone replacement therapy. This is legit in Washington State, okay? They're looking for surgeons that will be willing to operate on them. So you're taking a child who's been through massive trauma, low functioning, basically their mental development is very, very low. And then our state is saying, well, it's okay for them to make a life-altering decision. Let's just support that, because if you don't support this agenda, you're racist. There's been a fantastic job completed by people on the woke side that are saying, like, if you have a biblical worldview, you have a moral compass, right? You can't think that way anymore. Right? You can't, the Bible is probably one of the most prejudiced books out there, because it has one standard, and that's God's standard, right? And everyone else has to fall to that standard. We don't get to negotiate with the Lord and say, I don't really like that law right there, so I'm not going to do that, right? But since we believe that, and that's how we choose to live our life, the world is trying to put us into a place where we're racist, really, is what they're trying to say. Because if I say, hey, I don't want to call that young man a girl because I don't, that violates my moral compass, right? But I can't do that anymore because I'm racist against them, because the LGBT movement is now a race, no longer just a identity group on sexual identity. They're a legitimate people group now, a race. And so what we need to do as believers is operate in love, but maintain our biblical standard, maintain our moral compass of what right and wrong are, but we can still love people unconditionally. I'm really good at loving people that are a part of that community. That doesn't mean I have to believe everything they say and follow them, and compromise my values, and so far I basically told the state, I said, if you force me to take a child, I will not be able to take a little girl and tell her that she's a boy. I can't do it, right? I will love that child with my whole heart, but I will love that child back to a healthy place of understanding there's certain things that we can't control in life. You do not have a black man standing before you today, okay? I don't have a say in that, right? I'm not 6 foot tall. Dang it, I can't even dunk a basketball. But, there's certain things we don't get to control. I don't get to control that I'm a male, all right? And that ties into the original fall of Satan and the fallen angels. Basically, he was saying, let's become like God. Certain things God decides, we don't get to decide. We just have to line up with him. And so, anyway, one of the phrases that I want to leave with you, or have sink into you, it was awesome because you guys had a couple things up there. I highly recommend you go to the Reawaken America conference. I've been to 3 of them. So my wife and I have traveled basically across the country. We've been to, Florida. We went to one in Florida. We went to one in Dallas, and then we went to one in Oregon. And there's a lot of good people, a lot of good speakers that'll be at that event. And one of the main speakers is General Michael Flynn. He was Trump's, what am I trying to say? Secretary of State? What was he? Yes. The what? National security. Yes. Thank you. I knew that, but it just skipped my mind. But I got Chris, who's like, he's just like, it's all locked in. Yeah. So, but Trump's national security advisor, the man has been the target of the left for so long. They've slandered him, cost him so much money. But they started this, basically this Reawaken America tour when they all locked us all down and tried to put everybody behind masks, and then they try to force this vaccination on us. And so they have the Reawaken America tour is really basically what they're saying is, no, we're not going to do that. This is America. We are believers in Jesus. We're not going to submit to your unlawful decisions. And so if you can make it to the Reawaken America tour, actually I would just say make it to the Reawaken America tour, make it a priority, because if you want to start having an impact, what he says is local action. So when you become involved locally here in Spokane, whatever your sphere of influence is, that local action creates national impact. Okay, so if each one of us is doing something that on a local level, it starts trickling out. And then when our communities are also like, no, we're not going to be doing that. This is America. We are about freedom. We are about, supporting one another. And we're going to allow people to have their individual liberties and beliefs, right? And so when we start standing up and saying, hey, we're not going to tolerate those things on a local level, and we start really recognizing the things that are the challenges that we face every day. For me, I got a lot of challenges in foster care, but I have a platform that I can try to bring in new legislation. So we're part of a thing called the Washington Policy Center, where legislation gets sent down the road, or like basically is developed. You start to present best practices to legislatures, and hopefully you can change the way legislation is done, because there's a lot of bad laws out there, right? And our desire is to basically make an impact for God's kingdom, and we do that by being active locally. So let me skip down a little bit. A couple things that we need in my world. We need people to rise up, right? So if I have this culture in foster care that is being dominated by a sexual orientation movement, I need believers to take kids, to say, oh, I'll take that kid into my house. Oh, okay. We'll be the families that rise up to take these children, and get more Christians involved in foster care, to get Christians to support foster families that are struggling. It is a hard job being in foster care at times. When I've seen lots of families go through it, and sometimes you feel like even me, when I get a new kid, I'm like, did I just bite off more than I can chew? And I got this little we have one kid, we call him the tiny terrorist, because that boy would attack you every second he had, but he's like this tall. And so you're just full time, have this little boy just trying to rip your head off, and you're like, oh, you're kind of cute, but I have to hold you down now. And so, and that one boy, I mean, seriously, from my time my shift started until I got off shift, I basically restrained the kid all day, so just, I'm going to, he's like, so I dubbed him the tiny terrorist, So, cool story about that boy, though, is he's 16 now, and he is doing amazing. He's back home with his family, and just been really, really cool. So I want to encourage you guys to start meeting some of your state representatives, your local legislators. My wife has arranged for the event at our house, little barbecue that we had out there. We had prosecuting attorney, a couple state reps, the soon-to-be sheriff. They were all sitting in my yard, and I'm like, oh, cool, this is awesome. Also, and I've gone out to coffee with a couple state legislators, a couple guys from the Valley. Xavier's talked multiple times to a couple other state representatives, and you start really expressing what your concerns are. Hey, here's what we want to present. I have an opportunity to present to the Washington Policy Center and get some pieces of legislation in their annual manual, right? And so where it can be in there, the changes we want to see, or even getting the people involved to follow the legislation, because they don't always follow legislation. They kind of do what they feel like doing. Okay. So anyways, so I just want to encourage you guys to do that. the biggest thing is that we need to be in a spot where we, as in Isaiah chapter 6, basically, Isaiah had this vision of the Lord, and he was like in heaven, and he sees all these really cool, crazy, awesome things in heaven. And his response to when he sees all these angels and stuff, he's like, woe is me, I'm undone. I'm a man of unclean lips. And the Lord sends the seraphim down, and it touches this piece of hot coal to his lips, and it cleanses him. And right after this massive, crazy encounter with the Lord, and I've never had a seraphim fly to me and touch a coal to my lips and like, yeah, you're clean now. Nothing like that's happened to me. But Isaiah's response to that, because then God says, well, who am I going to send? And Isaiah's like, I'm right here. Send me, right? And we need to be in a position where we're like that continually. Like, here I am, Lord. I have weaknesses. I have insecurities, but I'm willing to go despite those weaknesses and insecurities. And so if you're looking for avenues, I mean, you just start with your core group of people. So like, what do you feel like God's calling us to do? And encourage one another to rise up. I can put you to work immediately if you want some stuff to do. So just let me know. And I'll give you guys my website after that. All right, so that's kind of like what we're doing locally. We're really trying to get that local action to make national impact. But we also have some ministries that we do overseas in Malawi. Malawi started in 2014. I've always been a missionary to America. And my response was, I already know the culture. I already speak the language. Why would the Lord want to send me overseas? Well, it started by my wife and I feeling that our daughter was supposed to go on a mission trip when she was 11 years old. And some people in our church felt like they were gonna pay her way. Well, there's no way this dad is gonna send his daughter to Malawi, Africa without some supervision. So I go as a chaperone, and I get wrecked when I get over there. Like, you see stuff on TV, you ever seen, for 75 cents a day, the price, back then it was the price of a cup of coffee. Now it would say like for $10 a day, the price of a cup of coffee. You can change the life of a child. You can feed them, right? Well, I get to Malawi, and it is usually on the bottom two of the poorest countries in the world, between, I think it's that and Burundi. Average annual income, $600 a year. Okay, is what a family makes. So they're living on basically $50 a month if they make that. In the villages, they don't even make that. They make way less than that in the villages. And so we get over there, and God just wrecks my heart for these people. Despite their immense poverty, despite the massive challenges that I've never seen suffering in the physical until I went to Africa. And I'm like, we're a bunch of whiners. My Wi-Fi's down. Oh no, and these people, we had this baby at one village that was pretty remote. They needed $2. $2 gets them a taxi both directions, $1 to get into town, $1 to get out, to get the child some malaria medication, which is free, but no one in the village can help because no one has any money. And so they can't get there because it's like 50 miles away, and the mom is just like distraught. And I started looking at that. I'm like, man, their tangible needs are not, the whole country trying to meet the needs of 20 million people, very difficult. But for the lives of the individuals that we've been able to meet and help in the villages, it changes things for them. And so in 2014, we did our first trip. In 2015, well, at the end of 2014, I went up to my translator. He's a pastor over there. He made, I think at that time he's making $600 a year. He had 3 kids. And I said, what do you need? And he says, I need a church building. So, and at this time, this is early phases of the source. I have no money. I'm not a very good fundraiser. I just cashed my check. I had, $200 paycheck, and put everything I had. People sponsored me to come on this mission trip. And I told him, I just said, next year I'm going to come back and we're going to build you a church. And then I walk away. I'm like, oh my gosh, I said that. You ever say something where you're like, bigger than what you actually can accomplish? So I come back and I go into John Solomon's office, the pastor of Zion at the time. And I opened my mouth and I said, I was going to come back and build a church. And John, I don't have any money. And he's like, we'll figure it out, And then I had a couple brothers from the church, and we put together a good team and went over there, built them a church. The year after that, we started our first orphanage, which is, when I say orphanage, you guys probably picture big building, tons of kids running around. Well, we do family style. So basically, we have a mom and a dad, and we get them a house, and then basically bring in kids so they live in a family atmosphere. So it's like foster care for orphan kids. Malawi has a population of 20.2 million people. 51% of that population is under the age of 18. So that's 10.3 million youth, and 18% of the Malawian kids are orphans. So that's 1.8 million orphans. And this country is like the size of New Jersey. It's just a sliver of land. So in year 3, we started our doing a feeding program too. And I want to read to you guys a couple stats with some of the stuff we did from my friend John Ngoma. He's our director over there. He just sent me some information this morning. So yeah, in year 3, we started a feeding program because I've always believed for a long time that the way to a kid's heart is through their stomach. Okay, if I can't meet your tangible needs, and this is like in Master's Commission many years ago, I don't know if you two remember the skit we did, but there was a guy and he's like, water, and he's like falling on the side of the road. And then people keep like, hey, I'll be praying for you, buddy. And they just run on by, And then it's like nobody's really helping him until finally the last person's like, well, I need to get the guy some water, right? That's what he really needs at the moment is water, right? So when I'm going into the villages, in the first year I was there, because I was broke, I went in and preached Jesus. But I left them, and they're like, I didn't do anything for wound care. I wasn't able to feed anybody. I spent every penny I had getting there, and I didn't have a way to meet their tangible needs. I preached a God of love, but I didn't have nothing tangible to do for them. And it crushed me. I was like, I got to be able to help these people. And there's a lot of suffering over there, and that's just one country on the African continent. And then, Southeast Asia has a lot of problems like that. There's lots of places in the world where there's massive suffering. But when people are like, well, what difference are you really making? I can tell you directly that in the lives of those people that we drilled a well for, the people that I provided fertilizer for, it changed that family. It changed them. It made a massive difference for them. And so I'm not going to allow my inability to impact 20 million keep me from impacting several thousand, okay? So anyways, so we have, let's see where I'm at. Year 4, I've been to Malawi 7 times. I'm on my 8th trip this year. We've done 3 well projects because when we're going in there and you see the cesspools where the people get their water, in Malawi, they use pit toilets. So you'll have a pit toilet, and everybody just digs in wherever, but there's not a separation between the pit toilet and their drinking source. So they're super close to each other, right? We all know that, so I'm over there, I'm like, you guys, you can't have your water so close to your pit toilet. And they're like, how do we fix that? And you just look around and it's like surrounded by all these little huts and everybody's got a pit toilet. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how do you help with this, right? The need seems overwhelming. So they'll walk, and the women are the laborers in Malawi. They do all the work. So a lot of the guys, I'm working on it. They're getting them to be more involved. But the women they're super strong, and they'll carry water on top of their heads like a 5-gallon. Well, it's like these big old. I don't know how they do it. They just load up, and there's probably 7 gallons of water. They just stick it right on their head, and they'll carry it for miles to get from their contaminated water source back to their hut. And so when we come in and drill a well, it changes the whole environment. It changes the whole village. So we came in, we did this 2 years ago, where I went into a village and they're like, we have no water. We just preached Jesus. We gave them some clothes and some food. And they took me to their cesspool drinking source. And they're like, this is all we have. And there's 4 villages here, about 500 people. And so I just got on Facebook and I made a post and I said, I need help raising money for a well. And within, I think it was like 2 or 3 hours, I had $4,000 just from people here in America. So we went back the next day and it was crazy. So I pull up in the car and you ever feel like paparazzi, and you're like, it was ridiculous, okay? I'm like, it's not me. And so I'm trying to get the focus off of the white dude onto the church, saying like, this is because of believers who care about you guys all the way across the world. It has, not a ton to do with me. But I can't even get out of the car because the people in the village are like, we cannot believe you're back. Who is this God you serve? I mean, like crazy, they all want to know Jesus now. And so we got in. I have a guy that does well drilling. He comes in, does the well, teaches them how to maintain the well, and then the tangible resource of water introduces them to the living water, and they've seen massive church growth over there. And so we've been doing that each year, and so let me just give you a quick update about from John of what he was saying, that some of the changes that have been happening. So there's a big battle between Christianity and Islam over there. It's peaceful for the most part in Malawi. It's not we don't have Al-Qaeda blowing people up, but the Muslims are really, really good at coming into a village and providing tangible needs and making converts by providing tangible needs. Christian missionaries, we're all broke. Okay, so we get over there, we spend every penny we had, and we're not really able to help in a tangible way. And so, but one of the things that's been happening is in John's area where we have our feeding program, he has 20 Muslim children that are coming on a regular basis to be part of the feeding program. So these are 20 Muslim children that have been converted to Christianity. 5 of those children have helped bring their whole families into the church. And so the Lord is really working in that community to draw through the children and through the services that the church is providing to draw those kids to Jesus and out of Islam. We're taking in tons of clothes and blankets and things like that. And many people are now attending the church in communities that we've reached with our programs. We're feeding 150 kids a week on multiple times that come because that's like their one sustainable meal that they're going to get that day. They get through the church. And in Malawi, they're very there's some like tribal stuff that happens. So they're very honoring towards. There's usually a village chief in each area, and when you befriend a chief and you convert a chief, you basically change the whole village. The whole village changes. And so we've had 5 of these village chiefs, 5 villages that have been drastically impacted, which has resulted in 85 additional families coming into the church. And there's been 8. Oh, and we've reached 8 additional churches. And so they're sprouting up these little new churches in each of these areas because of our influence. And so, which has been pretty awesome. And I attribute most of that work to John. I go once a year, right? And these guys are on the ground every single day. We just provide some tangible resources to be able to make that happen through basically raising money, sending money over there. And then when we go over each year, we take a good team of people and some resources to be able to help. But they already know we're coming because of the work that the Malawian team has done. And so part of that, like when I say they wouldn't let me out of the car, they were cheering and all that. That's because of the work that John's been doing for the whole year while we were gone. And we have, John, his wife, Etta, and then we have 2 other couples. We have Frank and Mercy, and then Mika and Lucy. They are our primary core people that work for us over there, and they're really changing their country, and it's been awesome to be part of that.